Slimers, strategies leading to improved management and enhanced resilience against slugs. It's a £2.6 million, 3-year DEFRA-funded project led by BOFIN with CHAP Agri-Centres, Harper Adams University, John Innes Centre and Small Robot Company as partners. Now, we've just had the first year trials in what we're looking at doing is assessing patch location, that we know that slugs gather in patches and we know that that's related to soil factors, and we've been doing trials with 27 slug sleuths, so these are farmers across the UK who are being paid to do the monitoring within the trials. So we've just had the data back and we've been talking to Keith Walters about what the preliminary results are.
Right, so the effect of waterlogging. Well, despite the problems it caused to the farmers who were trying to do the assessments, it has been a useful year in one respect. We know that slugs like damp conditions, but what they don't like is waterlogged conditions. They tend to drown in that and they don't do well at all. My concern was that although we know why slug patches form in the field and why they remain stable, it's due to a series of behavioural components. Those behaviours might be changed if they had a live or die threat from waterlogging. We have found that the waterlogging does not stop the patches forming or being stable. Well, in the past, finding and locating the middle of the patch is fairly easy and it remains fairly stable. The trouble is that the patches have a characteristic makeup. They tend to have slightly higher numbers at a central point and then go down to slightly lower numbers at the edges before fading into very low numbers which surround them. The key which we need to crack is where the edges of those patches actually are. We need to do that accurately so that as we make a pass with a pelleter, we can turn the machine on just as we enter the patch and turn it off again as we leave the patch. What we're doing now this year is getting a much better idea with the data we have of the equations which determine the relationship between where the patches are and the underlying soil characteristics, which we know now are beginning to show to be strongly related in some cases. And so the early fields, just the 2 or 3 that we've looked at so far, we have got significant relationships between percentage silt, percentage sand and percentage clay and organic matter content and the location of the edge of these patches. To form the equations relating the soil characteristics to the location of patches, we've taken soil samples regularly across our experimental arenas and related those to assessments of slug numbers right next to those soil samples. That, of course, is useless in terms of a commercial endpoint for a technique for targeting slug pellets. We can't do that, but it's good for research. What we want to do next, and this is the second part of which we'll be doing during the summer, is start looking at soil maps which have been taken primarily for use for other husbandry factors on farm and are regularly now commissioned by farmers, and see if we can reuse the data of the distributions of different soil characteristics, soil structure, organic matter, etc., given to us by the soil maps, and instead of taking soil samples, relate those variations across the field to the locations in which the patches are assessed. If we can do that, then maps which are already taken for other husbandry purposes can be used again in order to form a basis from which we can predict where the patches are and where the pellets should be targeted. Yes, the quality of the data. Yes, this has been an impressive finding for the year and something that's really pleasing. There were some who were a little concerned that asking farmers to take detailed research data in a fairly complex experiment was perhaps asking a little bit too much. Now, of course, you'll remember that we last year had trialled this in another experiment and had some very good results from, I think it was 8 farmers. This year we had a much wider, 27 odd farmers who were looking at it, and we've repeated that observation. The data we have had has been really first rate. The slug assessments are complete, they are usable, they are proving very easy to incorporate into analyses, and there are virtually no missing data points. And when you consider we're asking for 100 separate data points on slug assessments for each visit to the field, and there are multiple visits to the field, that is remarkable. The data set, in short, is first rate. It really is good, and has been one of the triumphs of Slimers. We can now work with the farmers who have the commercial acumen and understand what commercial constraints we're facing, and we can design our experiments more completely with them to ensure that those commercial aspects are taken into account in the design, as well as the biological and scientific rigor, and we can do that from a position of understanding, greater understanding by the farmers themselves. It's really been a promising result for this year's work.
Well, that's really interesting information from Keith there, and it just shows that farmers can do proper on-farm trials and gather really good quality data. And we've also learnt a little bit about slugs and how they behave. So what are the next steps? Well, we've got to look in more detail at the data, gather all the rest of the data, work out what all the outcomes are, and then look towards next year. Have a look out for when we're recruiting for Slug Sleuths next year and decide whether you'd like to take part in trials, or come onto the Slug Circle and join the discussion where we've got scientists and farmers all sharing experiences, so you can bring your experiences as well and learn a bit about slug behaviour.